For those of you who are considering buying someone else's practice or possibly taking over a partner in your practice, this video is for you. Taking over someone's practice is extremely exciting. There's all of the rush of now knowing that the clients are now yours, that you're taking control and all of that. And I've seen a lot of practitioners take over other people's practice or just become the partner in charge of a practice and kind of taking over all the other partners' book of business. And too often I find some of these people tend to forget the people that they're taking the practice from. So today we're going to have Howard Wirch share a little bit of his experience in working with a partner that he's taking over, and to talk a little bit about the challenges of doing so, because I think we mustn't forget that the person whom we're taking over, we're actually taking over their baby. So at the end of the video, after Howard's part, I'm just going to have a few more words to say on that. And so I hope you enjoy what Howard's thoughts are about taking over someone else's practice. You're currently operating with George Allard, and every time we've talked, you've always had an enormous amount of respect in working with George, who is now retiring. So there's obviously a different dynamic because you're the young practitioner who's coming in with all these wild ideas, and he's kind of saying, well, this is now not how we used to do it. And so I can understand from both perspectives, being now on both sides of the coin, what it's like to deal with someone who's on his way out, who's got their ways of doing, and you're kind of trying to implement certain new ways of thinking.
Right.
So I would just like you to share what that's been like, because I can imagine there must be some, as much of respect as you may have for George, it does bring up some difficulties to some degree.
The respect I have for George comes out of that question, because George, although as all of us have our own issues, things that we deal with, George is very open-minded.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely. And probably one of the first practitioners to e-file.
Okay.
Probably one of the first to adopt electronic time and billing system. And always has, wanted more out of the practice and was never afraid to take these things on. Now, he was not always the implementer of those things, but he always supported, a huge supporter. For me personally, being a mentor of mine, I would say that it was his support and belief in me that propelled me to where I am, partly. And at the end of the day, although philosophically, of course, no one agrees 100% with one other person, we've allowed each other room, if you understand what I'm saying, to be ourselves. And he's really, in the last number of years, allowed me to take on the practice and really move forward. And he says, you know what, I'm moving on, so this is your baby anyway, so I'm going to allow that. So he's been really great. I can't say enough about him. And big believer in people. And I think that is what the number one takeaway that I have with George. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you cannot help but have tremendous amount of respect for someone who's willing, because I'd be willing to bet there's a lot of things you want to implement. He's going, not what I would do, but if you believe in it, go for it.
100%.
Boy, that's not everybody can do that.
No. And I mean, at the end of the day, there's certain things, if you've been in practice as long as George has, he's not going to be taking on some of the new procedures quickly or in full force. And I respect that. I get that. After that many years, I don't think I'd want to change. Yeah. But at the end of the day, he still supports it from a firm point of view. He might not personally keep his time and billings up like I would or some of the team would, but what does it matter at this point, right? Yeah. He's supporting it, and he's saying, hey, I know this is good for the firm. I know, and I really, at the end of the day, my success and my retirement is based on the success of this firm, so I'm on that. So I'm with that. Right on.
So one of the things I wanted to share as it relates to taking over someone else's practice is once again to remind you that for most of these practitioners, and that applies to business owners, whenever they're selling their business or their practice, what they're really doing is giving their baby up for adoption. And it has very similar attachment as it does to our child. And I think until you've been in business for yourself and grown this practice from birth, that practice or that business does resemble in many ways your own child, because you have grown it from birth, grew it, helped it mold itself and all of that. And so it has very much of the same kind of attachment you have to your own child. So letting it go is not just like selling a car. Well, it could be for certain people, I suppose they're attached to their car, but it's not the same. So a lot of people think that people selling their business is similar to selling a house or a car, but it's usually a lot more deep-rooted than that. So those are the kind of things that I suggest you be very careful about. For those of you who are looking at retiring, before you sell your practice, I would caution you to be very careful about how you sell your practice. And I'm not only talking about dollar signs. And of course, if you're going to sell your practice, I would encourage you to get all you can for your practice, because after all, you spent a lifetime building this thing and it does represent your retirement. But what I'm referring to is more than the dollar side of it, but to retire well emotionally. And I think although we know it's going to be difficult to let go of our practice, I think many of us retire without full appreciating to what extent we're emotionally attached to our business and how difficult it can and will be to let it go. And I know there's a lot of practitioners who think, oh my God, this is so hard, so much work, and it's just so demanding, and the grind is just getting to them, that they get to a point where they just want to sell and are just happy to sell, and they think that the day they sell, they'll be able to just ride off in the sunset and everything's going to be nice. But I think what most people forget is that emotional attachment they have to their business. So before you go out and sell your business, I would suggest that you actually do a bit more research and maybe be better prepared to what life is going to be like when you sell your business. And there's not tons of information on there on that subject. And that's something I've discovered, is that finding that place where you can share and those ideas and those emotions related to letting go of your business is difficult to come by. So with that note, one of the things that I'm contemplating doing this fall is a bit of a retreat for those of you who are either recently retired from your business or as a CEO, or those of you who are planning to retire in the next year or two to better prepare yourself, or maybe some of you who are just self-employed or CEO and are looking forward to the day where they can turn the page on their current chapter, but are not too sure how to do that. And so I'm looking at putting together a retreat on that very subject. The details of that are still being worked out. But if you are interested in that, I would appreciate you either emailing me, and we're going to have the email at the end of this video, or leaving your comments below in LinkedIn or in YouTube, so that we can be aware, maybe be in communication with you in better preparing this retreat, and hopefully invite you to that. So again, for those of you who are struggling with their retirement, I would really encourage you to email me so that we can maybe put you in contact with people who can help you, and maybe even share some of the things that I've learned over this last few years, especially on how to better retire emotionally. So again, if you like this video, please show that you like it by clicking on the like. Please subscribe, and also don't forget to work on your practice rather than in your practice.